Hello and welcome to day 87 of the Not Alone Today chronological Bible reading plan with Joseph and Anu. Today we are reading Psalm 59 and then we'll go back to 1 Samuel chapter 19, picking it up from verse 18 all the way to the end of chapter 21, which is in verse 15.
Psalm 59. To the choir master, according to Do Not Destroy, a meek time of David, when Saul sent men to watch his house in order to kill him. Verse 1. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from bloodthirsty men.
For behold, they lie in wait for my life. Fierce men stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord, for no fault of mine. They run and make ready. Awake, come to meet me and see. You, Lord God of hosts, are God of Israel. Rouse yourself to punish all the nations. Spare none of those who treacherously plot evil.
Each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city. There they are, bellowing with their mouths, with swords in their lips. For who they think will hear us?
But you, O Lord, laugh at them. You hold all the nations in derision. O my strength, I will watch for you. For you, O God, are my fortress. My God, in his steadfast love, will meet me. God will let me look in triumph on my enemies.
Kill them not, lest my people forget. Make them totter by your power and bring them down, O Lord, our shield. For the sin of their mouths and the words of their lips, let them be trapped in their pride. For the cursing and lies that they utter, consume them in wrath. Consume them till they are no more, that they may know that the Lord, that God rules over Jacob to the ends of the earth.
Each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city. They wander about for food and growl if they do not get their fill.
But I will sing of your strength. I will sing aloud of your steadfast love in the morning. For you have been to me a fortress and a refuge in the day of my distress. O my strength, I will sing praises to you. For you, O God, are my fortress, the God who shows me steadfast love.
1 Samuel chapter 19 from verse 18. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Naoth. And it was told Saul, Behold, David is at Naoth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as head over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. When it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah and came to the great wall that is in Seku. And he asked, Where are Samuel and David? And one said, Behold, they are at Naoth in Ramah. And he went there to Naoth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. And as he went, he prophesied until he came to Naoth in Ramah. And he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Thus it is said, Is Saul also among the prophets?
Chapter 20. Then David fled from Naoth in Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life? And he said to him, Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. Why should my father hide this from me? It is not so. But David vowed again, saying, Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he thinks, Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. Then Jonathan said to David, Whatever you say, I will do for you. David said to Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is a new moon, and I should not fail to sit at the table with the king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field till the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there's a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. If he says good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know the harm is determined by him. Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father? And Jonathan said, Far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father, the harm should come to you, would I not tell you? Then David said to Jonathan, Who will tell me if your father answers you roughly? And Jonathan said to David, Come, let's go out into the field. So they both went out into the field.
And Jonathan said to David, The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness, when I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or the third day, behold, if he is well disposed towards David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, May the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul.
Then Jonathan said to him, Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. On the third day, go down quickly to the place where you hid yourself when the matter was in hand, and remain beside the stone heap. And I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send the boy, saying, Go find the arrows. If I say to the boy, Look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them, then you are to come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you and there is no danger. But if I say to the youth, Look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever.
So David hid himself in the field. And when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat as at other times, on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side, but David's place was empty.
Yet Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, Something has happened to him. He is not clean, surely he is not clean. But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, Why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today? And Jonathan said to Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, Let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason he has not come to the king's table.
Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame, and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, Why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had disgraced him. In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him a little boy. And he said to his boy, Run and find the arrows that I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy came to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy and said, Is not the arrow beyond you? And Jonathan called after the boy, Hurry, be quick, do not stay. So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master, but the boy knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, Go and carry them to the city. And as soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another, and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, because we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever." And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city.
Chapter 21. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech came to meet David, trembling, and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" And David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has charged me with the matter, and said to me, let no one know anything of the matter about which I sent you, and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here." And the priest answered David, "I have no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread if the young men have kept themselves from women." And David answered the priest, "Truly, women has been kept from us, as always when I go on expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy, even if it's an ordinary journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there, but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away.
Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen.
Then David said to Ahimelech, "Then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand? For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste." And the priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you take that, take it, for there is none but that here." And David said, "There is none like that. Give it to me."
And David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, "Is not this David the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s?"
And David took these words to heart, and was much afraid of Achish the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them, and pretended to be insane in their hands, and made marks on the doors of the gate, and let spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, "Behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen, that you've brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. So by way of quick recap, Psalm 59, where we started from, gives us a bit of context to where we left off yesterday in 1 Samuel 19, verses 1 to 17, where Saul became very adamant about killing David. And so Psalm 59 is the Psalm of Laments that David wrote at that point in his story. Then in 1 Samuel 19, verses 18 to 24, when we picked up the story from 1 Samuel, we saw how David fled and went to Ramah to Samuel, and how Saul continued to pursue him even to that place. And God arrested every delegation that was sent to kill David. He made them to start prophesying. And even when Saul himself came, he also prophesied all the way to Ramah. In chapter 20, we saw how Jonathan and David became even yet closer, and Jonathan devised a means of communication whereby he would be David's eyes and ears in the palace and find a way to communicate in a code that David will understand, as to know whether or not for him to flee or whether or not it's safe for him to emerge out of his hideout. It turns out that he needed to flee. The chapter ended with the two of them having a very emotional farewell encounter in which they wept and kissed and parted their ways. Chapter 21 brings us into the story of David moving on to Nob, where Ahimelech was the priest. And Ahimelech met with David needing some food, asked if they could have some bread. And the only bread that was available was bread that was meant to be eaten only by priests. And Ahimelech allowed David to say if his men had been pure sexually, they could go ahead and have the bread. And they did. And there's a line there about one of Saul's people, actually Saul's herdsmen and Edomites, that was also present, as though something is going to happen later on because of that detail. And then, of course, David flees to Gath in the region of the Philistines to meet King Achish. And there he had to feign to be mad for him to escape with his life. And that is where we paused in the story. Back to Psalm 59. What stood out to you, my love?
It's just the stark way David describes his enemies, how they were howling like dogs and prowling about the city. And whilst I was reading it, it brought to mind, like, actually, this is a very good way to approach situations where we're just helpless about what's going on. Like, what I know is that most times when we are going through like tough situation and people are on our case and we don't know why, we've tried to explain ourselves to them, but they are not listening to us. We tend to go to God and say, God, please change this story, change this, help me to get out of this, vindicate me. But I think there's a beauty in actually describing their actions to God. It takes the offense off, in a sense. It's just as though you're conversing with a friend to say, imagine what he said. Just putting it in him as you felt it. And then beseeching God to come to your rescue. So I like how David, his style here of how he first described what they did to him. And then asked God what to do. And the part where he said, God should not kill them, but should make them total and bring them down and to make them trapped in their pride. I thought, okay, that's very specific. Yeah, what stood out to you, Mila?
Thank you. Actually, so this is a classic example of what is called a Psalm of Lament. And most of the Psalms, actually, about over 40%, close to half of the Psalms in the Bible, in the book of, they call it the Psalter, the book of Psalms, the 150 Psalms. Out of that Psalter, about almost half of them are like this. They are Psalms of Lament. And what I like about them is, like you rightly said, the honesty. But not only in terms of how, when it comes to us and we're going through situations, not only does this kind of instruct us in ways in which we can be vulnerable with God, but also the entire Psalter, the entire book of Psalms has also given us, in some sense, an ammunition or to give words to our feelings. So like while you're going through stuff, you can come to Psalm 59 and literally read it aloud, chant it prayerfully, taking David's words as an echo of your situation, of your words. And indeed, as you're reading it, there are various points in it where it says Selah. Like Selah means pause and think calmly about what you have just said. And when you really do that prayerfully, you begin to see indeed that David's story in some sense is your story. Your story in some sense is like David's story. And both of you are joining together in this rhapsody of fellowship that transcends time to echo your heart's desire to God. But the classic thing about most Psalms of Lament is actually how they end. It doesn't just end in lamentation and complaining and asking God to deal ruthlessly with the enemy. But the last two verses begins with a but. It says, but I will sing of your strength. And I think it's in these buts that we begin to see what is constant, irrespective of the challenges we may be going through. But I will sing of your strength. I will sing aloud of your steadfast love in the morning. You've been to me a fortress. You've been to me a refuge. So the strength of God, the steadfast love, the fortressness of God, the refugity of God, and this is me just forming these words, it gives us something to anchor, to root ourselves in spite of what may be going on all around us. Yeah.
It's very instructive.
Thank you. 1 Samuel 19, the latter part of chapter 19. What stood out to you?
What stood out to me is more what's a bit curious on why did he have to strip off his clothes and prophesy naked?
Yeah, that's actually the part I did highlight as well. And I think not only is this a classic story of God fighting for you, like sends this group of people to go and do such and such to David, they started prophesying. Sends another batch, they started prophesying. Sends another batch, they started prophesying. And then say, okay, I'm going to go myself. And he himself also not only started prophesying, but stripped off his clothes. Remember when we said Jonathan gave his hammer, gave his sword and all that to David, that it was more or less a covenantal gesture to say, I'm ridding myself of my royalty and bequeathing it to you while I'm still alive. In more or less is what that means. That's symbolically what's happening here as well. In Saul stripping off his clothes and prophesying naked all day, it's also a gesture of saying the kingship has been taken away from him. The royalness, the royal paraphernalia that distinguishes him for the calling of being the king, he has stripped it off in this while prophesying. So this is not just something happening randomly. He's prophesying. We don't know the words of his prophecies, but he's under the influence of the Spirit and is doing something physically that has spiritual connotations. And if anything, to say the least, it's reiterating the fact that his kingdom has come to an end and God has handed it over, the leadership of that kingdom, to another, a man after his own heart.
True.
Chapter 20 stood out to you. Very interesting story.
Yeah, what was really interesting was what Jonathan said, that his father would not do anything without disclosing it to him. And I thought that's good parenting. That trust, your child knows that, if this is happening, then I should know about it. I know the context is a bit, it's not exemplary, but just that part was quite instructive for me to say, to know that your child, you just take your family along with whatever it is you're doing, so much that they can boast like, I don't think you're right, when they hear anything otherwise outside. Yeah. What about you?
Yes, similarly for me, of course, again, now we see in verses 14 to 17, Jonathan literally striking a covenant with David. And this is the reference point to what David remembered when he says, is there still anybody left in the house of Jonathan that I may show favor and mercy and compassion to them? And then the story of Mephibosheth happens. It's because of this very gesture in verses 14 to 17, whereby he's saying, if I'm still alive, show me steadfast love that I may not die. Do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever. Saying this to David, because he is persuaded that God is on the side of David and God is going to cut off every one of David's enemies. And when that happens, he's saying, even if I'm alive or if I'm not alive, see that you do not cut off your steadfast love from my own house, from my family, forever. But there is a phrase that kept coming from verse 18 downwards about David's place being empty. Of course, we know what that means in the literal sense of the story. But it's just interesting that they kept using that very phrase in verse 18. Tomorrow is the new moon, you'll be missed because your seat will be empty. In verse 25, Abner sat by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. In verse 27, on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. That language of your place being empty, and of course, this is me reading and hearing this from my African Pentecostal mindset, where a big prayer point would be, on the day of your joy, your seat should not be empty. On the day of your celebration, your seat should not be empty. In this case, of course, David's space needed to be empty so that his life can be preserved. But indeed, I just thought to prophetically declare that someone listening to this on the day of your celebration, it's meant to be a celebration, it's New Moon Festival. On the day of your celebration, your seat will not be empty. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Another thing that was quite interesting to me was how Saul had his spare at dinner time. What is going on with him? They were sat down for a festival.
And he had his
How
spear.
did his spare get there? Was it planning to hurl it at someone?
That's to show how intensely he wants to see David dead. Just in case David appears out of the blues, I'm battle ready to pin him down.
Oh Lord!
I didn't
how
think
could I
of
get
that.
there? Like, nothing was mentioned about a spear being at the side, but all of a sudden, because Jonathan said what Jonathan disobeyed him, the next is to hurl his spear at his own son.
Indeed.
I felt like, okay, let's be careful when we get to dinner tables.
There's actually one of the proverbs in the book of Proverbs that says something about that when you are invited to eat with a king, that you should put a knife to your throat or something like that. Like you want to ensure that you are not eating wantonly. You behave seemingly. You kind of keep yourself under good composure, so that you don't
get speared.
Actually get speared. All right, chapter 21, the final chapter we considered. Did anything stand out to you?
You might help me clarify this, but I don't like David's deception.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't like the fact that he asked for the holy bread. And we know that bread is not meant to be touched by anyone other than the priest. And it's meant to, when we read Deuteronomy, I can't remember clearly. But these are only things that should be handled as prescribed. David deceiving the priest to eat it. I don't think him fleeing for his life justifies the means of defying God's instruction. And also taking an instrument, the Goliath's weapon, that was already before the presence of God. It's already itemized as a holy item. So why take it, and why take it by deception? Could you not have fashioned another weapon somewhere or sort it out somehow? Why go to the priest to ask for those items? And then why lie though?
Interesting. That came to mind as well, especially because I know that Jesus would go back to reference this passage in the New Testament, and both Matthew and Luke records that. Matthew records it in Matthew 12 verses 1 to 8. Luke records it in, I think, chapter 6 verse 3 to 4. And this is one of those passages where, theologians will look to David and say the guy was living way above his time, his era, and his dispensation, drawing unreservedly from the dispensation of grace that is yet to come, the dispensation of the new covenant that is yet to come. And that's not to say that what he did was right. What he did under the law was absolutely wrong. But the context in which Jesus would reference this passage helps us to give some clarity to it. His disciples had just unknowingly scraped off wheat on the Sabbath day and put it in their mouth. They plucked grain actually, and then put it in their mouth. And of course, the Pharisees quickly pointed that out to show that his disciples were breaking the law. And Jesus's argument is that human necessity and even mercy by principle takes precedence over, we have to do this, we have to carry out the letters of this law according to the details, which is what the Pharisees are all about, which is what, law keepers are all about. They are all about every tiny bit of the law. At devotion this morning, I was explaining to the boys, Joshua and Samuel, our boys, about, because part of what we were reading said something about, it was this passage where Jesus was again correcting the Pharisees and the priests and saying to them that, he's saying to the audience, do what the Pharisees tell you, but don't live like they live. Like, do what they say, but don't do what they do. Because what they say and what they do are two different things. They are preaching things that they are not practicing. And Jesus is saying that. So when I was trying to expand on that point to the boys, I said, I remembered listening to this sermon where someone described a lift in Jerusalem, in one of the hotels that is called the Shabbat lift, that when it's Sabbath day, if you get into that lift, it is considered that to press the button of the floor you are going to is work. And so to avoid you having to press the button, it's a lift that doesn't have any such button, but it will stop on every floor automatically. I said, so imagine that you're going to floor 12 and you are pressed to use you are bursting, you need to use the loo. And you are in this lift that needs to stop on every floor before it gets to your room. The eyes of Joshua kept widening and widening. And he said, how will anybody think that is doing work? That would mean that even breathing is work. That would mean that would mean that even blinking is work and things like that. And that's the extent to which law can be taken. You can read it just in the letters of it. But what David did here, again, it's wrong under the law because he has lied. But they needed food. They needed to survive. It's the same in the context of the disciples of Jesus. They've not eaten. They found themselves in a field of grain. The law permits them to do that, to eat, except that because it is the Sabbath day, doing that is considered breaking the law because you have worked. And Jesus is like, how does that even add up? If your sheep should fall into a ditch on the Sabbath day, will you say because it's the Sabbath day, I'm not going to pick him up, I'm not going to rescue it? It's not the spirit behind the law. The spirit behind the law is not to get people hungry and die in hunger at the end of the day. It's to do good. It's to be merciful and things like that. So yes, this is David, for whatever reason, showing that he has something of that kind of understanding. And he was not punished for it. Unlike Saul, who went ahead and sacrificed. Remember that passage?
And the kingdom was taken from him.
And Samuel said, you have done a foolish thing. And because of that, the kingdom will be taken away from him. So David seemed to understand something that most people of his day do not understand. But there is no way that you will read this and just simply justify it on the face value of what he did. What he did was wrong. He lied. And then what happens next is even more lies, because he would feign to be mad to escape being killed in the region of the king of Gath. So it's just all this drama that David is playing out. But in the grand scheme of things, it's actually deeply rooted in the grace of God and understanding of the grace and mercy of God that continues to protect him for the destiny ahead of him, I believe.
Yes, and what's very interesting again to me in chapter 21 was the fact that it firstly took Goliath's sword and then went to the place where Goliath came from, Gath, with the same sword to want to live there, and then pretended to be mad. It's baffling. And it's good that this kind of stories baffles us, because then we know that we don't know it all.
Indeed.
And we are left with this suspension to know, okay,
what happens next?
I'll get to find out how this all ties up together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Indeed. And we look forward to what happens next, because when we come back on day 88, we'll be considering even more Psalms that were written about this same period. And then we'll pick up the story from 1 Samuel 22 as well as 23. But till then, just remember,
you're not alone
today. God bless you.
Bless you.